New bridges must be built because in the minds of the majority of our people today, Africa is too far away. So the only way you and I can point them in that direction is build new bridges. We have to have the type of understanding of Africa and the type of understanding of our people here in order to build a bridge, a contact, a line of communication between the two. And once the lines of communication have been established and our African brothers can stretch forth their hands and reach us, and we can stretch forth our hands and reach them, why there's nothing that this blue-eyed man in this country will be able to do to you and me successfully from that day onward.
Why should the children of the African diaspora establish economic, political, social, spiritual, and organizational links to the mother continent? Dr. Claude Anderson once said, "Civil rights have been ineffective for most blacks in terms of improving substandard housing, lowering their unemployment rate, transforming dysfunctional schools, removing massive poverty, reducing high crime, or eliminating social rejection by whites, Asians, Hispanics, and other ethnics. Black social and economic progress will come about only when blacks muster the power and the commitment to bring forth positive change." The increased reliance on computers and immigrant labor has all but ended white society's dependence on black muscle power, yet the planned obsolescence of black labor will only exacerbate the 600-year black Holocaust. Second-class citizenship will only end when blacks can recognize political, economic, and social trends and policies that are detrimental to them as a group, and collectively demand either an end to such practices or inclusion as beneficiaries of such practices. The lower the percentage of blacks in the workplace, for instance, the lower whites fear the blacks will acquire wealth. This is an important finding and raises questions about the wisdom of integration. If race relations are based on power, the more blacks integrate into white society, the less chance they have to acquire power. Blacks' willingness to dilute their strength destroys any perception of their having power. It is clear that blacks must both solve their own problems and structure a national plan of action that puts their priorities first and foremost. Self-empowerment is the only road to economic justice, but it requires the support of a national policy and plan of action. So again you ask, what is the importance of Mama Africa to us?
Tell me this, which part of the world has seen its number of democracies increase nearly eightfold in just 2 decades? Eastern Europe? No, it is Africa. Which continent has 6 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world? Asia? No, it's Africa.
Here we want to share our honorable ancestor Malcolm X's most profound insight on Mama Africa's importance to us. Africa is strategically located geographically between the East and West. It is the most valuable piece of property involved in the struggle between the East and West. You can't get to the East without going past it, and you can't get from the East to the West without going past it. It sits right there between all of them. It is snugged into a nest between Asia and Europe. It can reach either one. None of the natural resources that are needed in Europe that they get from Asia can get to Europe without coming either around Africa, over Africa, or in between the Suez Canal, which is sitting at the tip of Africa. She can cut off Europe's bread. She can put Europe to sleep overnight, just like that, because she's in a position to. The African continent is in a position to do this, but they want you and me to think Africa is a jungle of no value, of no consequence. because they also know that if you knew how valuable it was, you realize why they're over there killing our people. And you realize that it is not some kind of humanitarian purpose or reason. Also, Africa as a continent is important because of its tropical climate. It's so heavily vegetated you can take any section of Africa and use modern agricultural methods and turn that section alone into the breadbasket for the world. Almost any country over there can feed the whole continent. If it only had access to people who had the technical know-how to bring into that area modern methods of agriculture. It's rich. Another reason a continent is so important is because of its gold. It has some of the largest deposits of gold on earth and diamonds. Not only the diamonds you put on your finger and in your ear, but industrial diamonds. Diamonds that are needed to make the machines that cannot function or cannot run unless they have these diamonds. These industrial diamonds play a major role in the entire industrialization of the European nations, and without these diamonds, their industry would fall. As soon as the European powers lost their African possessions, Belgium had an economic crisis, the same year she turned the Congo loose. She had to rearrange her entire economy, and her economic methods had to be revised, because she had lost possession of the source of most of her raw materials that she got almost free, almost with no price or output whatsoever. When she got in a position where she didn't have access to these free raw materials anymore, it affected her economy. It affected the French economy. It affected the British economy. It drove all these European countries to the point where they had to come together and form what is known as the European Common Market. Prior to that, you wouldn't hear anything about a European Common Market. When these countries fall, it would mean that the source of raw material, natural resources, some of the richest mineral deposits on Earth, would be taken away from the European economy. And without free access to this, the economy of Europe wouldn't be worth 2 cents. All of your European countries would be no more important than a country like Norway, which is alright for Norwegians, but has no influence beyond that. It's just another country stuck up someplace in the northern part, like Sweden and some of those other places. Every European country would be just as insignificant as the smallest insignificant country in Europe right now if they lost the rest of Africa, because the rest of Africa that's still colonized is the part of the African continent that is backing up the European economy. And if the economy of Europe was to sink any farther, it would really wash away the American economy. The American economy can never be any stronger than the European economy because both of them are one. It's one and the same economy. They are brothers. I say this because it is necessary for you and me to understand what is at stake. You can't understand what's going on in Mississippi if you don't know what's going on in the Congo. And you really can't be interested in what's going on in Mississippi if you're not also interested in what is going on in the Congo. They're both the same. The same interests are at stake. The same sides are drawn up. The same schemes are at work in the Congo that are at work in the Mississippi. The same state, no difference whatsoever. As these African nations get into a position to increase their own power and to industrialize, what does this mean? It means that where they now are in a market for American goods and America's finished products and a market for European finished products, when they are able to finish their own products, they will be able to get their products cheaper because they're putting their own raw materials into the finished products. Now the raw materials are taken from Africa, shipped all the way to Europe, used to feed the machines of the Europeans and make jobs for them, and then turned around and sold back to the Africans as finished products. But when the African nations become industrialized, they can take their own products and stick them in the machines and finish them to whatever they want. Then they can live cheaper. The whole system will be a system with a high standard of living, but a cheaper standard of living. This standard of living automatically will threaten the standard of living in Europe because it will cut off European market. European factories can't produce unless they have some place to market their products. American factories can't produce unless they have some place to market their products. It is for this reason that the European nations in the past have kept the nations in Latin America and in Africa and in Asia from becoming industrial powers. They keep the machinery and the ability to produce and manufacture limited to Europe and limited to America. Then this puts America and the Europeans in a position to control the economy of all other nations and keep them living in a low standard.
Africa's economy as a whole grew by about 5 or 6% last year, whereas Europe only grew by about 1%.
You know, the thing is that most of what you hear about Africa, you know, some of them are actually just hearsay. It's just perception of people that some of them, they are too lazy to find out whether Africa is really good or bad. They must have heard from somebody saying that, look, Africa is not a good place to do business, it's tough. But things have actually changed, and we're the only continent that's really been growing at about 5% of GDP. You know, so the area where you need to go in and invest and make money definitely is, Africa.
The doctrine of unequal exchange continues to be an effective strategy that whites use to gain access to black wealth. Blacks annually transfer their disposable income into white communities and receive little more than customer satisfaction in return. Currently, white businesses have a lock on natural resources throughout the world. It is important, therefore, that blacks pursue mutual supportive business ventures with blacks of other nations, especially resource-rich Africa, which represents the best source for black Americans to secure raw materials for vertical industrial development. A vertical black business structure would include a network of linked businesses, from retail to manufacturing to the control of resources. With the cooperation of government, blacks and black African nations could help develop vertical industries. Black African nations have access to natural resources but lack the professional middle class and surplus disposable capital needed to capitalize on natural resources. Black Americans have the disposable income and the professional middle class but lack the access to natural resources. Vertical integration provides business opportunities for warehouses, wholesalers, shippers, distributors, truckers, dealers, insurance carriers, and other supportive businesses. The interrelatedness or the vertical connection of the businesses establishes a network that protects the business from competitors while guaranteeing an economically empowering flow of wealth via that services and products. Markets can be expanded to achieve economics of sale by exporting products from black communities to surrounding communities. With a strong sense of national community, a product produced in one black community could be competitive, produced for domestic or markets in black foreign nations. Vertical businesses within the black communities could reduce high underemployment and unemployment rates by hiring black people, enhancing their community's tax base, and increasing their group's wealth and disposable income. In addition, black businesses would not have a sole base of black customers. Just as other ethnic and racial groups provide solid and dependable customer bases for their industries, black leadership must find new opportunities for black businesses to gain access to raw materials if the concept of vertical integration is to be viable. Since established white industries have control of most natural resources and raw materials, blacks should focus their energies on black African nations. Africa represents both another market for expansion and a new source of natural resources that could fuel black businesses in America. Blacks should seek business relationships with various independent African countries, primarily in terms of securing competitive control of resources for new vertically integrated resources. Blacks could then start businesses based upon new valuable resources such as hardwood from Cameroon for a vertical chain of wood milling and furniture manufacturing, rubber for an automobile tire company, and diamonds and gold for jewelry and industrial use. All Black self-empowerment activities must contribute to building a strong sense of peoplehood and commitment to the acculturation principle of taking care of oneself, one's family, and one's race. This principle extends to international business and dealing with African and Caribbean nations. Black Americans and Black Africans should first learn to deal with Black nations to which they have natural links before dealing with white colonialists. Power will increase in direct proportion to the degree of unity among Black people. African nations have begun to privatize or sell state-owned assets as business opportunities for entrepreneurs. Black Americans should explore the opportunity to purchase some of these properties. They should also seriously explore opportunities to establish vertical businesses with Africa. These business opportunities could provide Blacks with a vital link to industrial development, but let the buyer beware. This is not a giveaway and due diligence is required. Marcus Garvey was one of the greatest Black leaders we ever had. He organized more Black people than any other Black leader in the world. His organization had over 900 branches in 40 different countries. His accomplishments in business and enterprise with building employment opportunities for his people are well documented, but I want to share something that rarely gets mentioned and one of the greatest feats in Pan-African history before it was sabotaged by the United States government and its ignorant Negro puppets. In 1920, Garvey dispatched to Liberia, West Africa, a delegation of Black people to confer with the Liberian government on joint land ownership of that country by African people in the Western world. His organization explained to the Liberian people that the organization wanted to move its headquarters to Liberia to build up a Black community from the West in Africa. He wanted his Black Star Line for trading purposes, and he wanted to develop the land through building hospitals and other institutions for the benefit of the people of Liberia. Garvey sent a group of experts in various fields of engineering and agriculture to Liberia, and there are confirmed documents of agreement between the UNIA and the Liberian government you can find in the book The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. His Pan-African efforts sparked the birth of many nations and prominent leaders in Africa like Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, Nnamdi Azikiwe of Nigeria, Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, to name a few. Marcus Garvey did all that without any help from white people or the government. He did this during a time when there was no televisions or computers or the technology that we have today. After Marcus Garvey, the most honorable ancestor Malcolm X was the first Black leader and probably the most successful Black leader to pick up Marcus Garvey's Pan-African vision and actually establish organizational, concrete links to Africa. With his newly found organization he established called the Organization of Afro-American Unity. In July of 1964, the Organization of African Unity held an African Summit meeting in Cairo, Egypt, where Malcolm was able to attend as an observer. And here is where he delivered a very remarkable memo to the appeal to the African heads of state, vying for Africa to participate in our struggles abroad and us participating in their struggle. The impact of this 8-page memorandum allowed Malcolm to gain the sympathy of many prominent and very important African heads of state. Malcolm's Pan-African internationalism left a profound impact on the African continent. History records the fact with now Congressman John Lewis and Donald Harris in a report of their activities in Africa on behalf of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, stating that Malcolm's impact on Africa was just fantastic. In every country, he was known and served as the main criteria for categorizing other Afro-Americans and their political views. Malcolm's quest to establish legitimacy to the Afro-American struggle for human rights and international law and organization mandated three key components. First, Afro-Americans had to speak to international bodies with one voice. Second, if the alternative of the bullet ever had to be resorted to, unity of Afro-American and African people with organizational links could be a necessary prerequisite for the successful urban guerrilla warfare. Lastly, international recognition could only be achieved if Afro-Americans could organize as a nationality and present their demands in a national capacity. M.S. Handler in the New York Times on January 2, 1965 took note that Malcolm had been urging the Africans to employ the racial situation in the United States as an instrument of attack in discussing international problems. Such a strategy would give the African states more leverage in dealing with the United States and would in turn give the African Americans here more leverage in the American society. No other mainstream black leader of the 1960s went to Africa and talked about revolution. He was the first black leader of this period to take Africa seriously enough to go there and speak directly about the conditions of African people in the U.S. Malcolm represented a link with Black America which was politically acceptable to these Pan-Africanists in Africa. Although Malcolm did not create the ideology of Pan-Africanism, he struggled and successfully popularized it to his constituency and informed them of its rich tradition. It was the insights of this tradition that Malcolm added that elevates him to a prominent Pan-African internationalist that should be studied as a model of success, and his legacy impacts the future generations that share this tradition. Just like Malcolm expanded upon the vision of the honorable ancestor Marcus Garvey, Stokely Carmichael, aka Kwame Ture, picked up the torch and carried the vision that Malcolm left behind. Kwame Ture started out his political career in the civil rights movement in America. Then he made a transition to the Black Power movement that ultimately led him to heed the call of Brother Malcolm X to internationalize our struggle and look toward Mother Africa through Pan-Africanism. He left for Africa in 1969 and ended up working with Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Touré to help further strengthen Pan-Africanism through establishing several institutions, but the most influential one was the help he did in organizing the All African People's Revolutionary Party that still organizes today amongst conscious Africans abroad. Kwame Ture was a steadfast Pan-African revolutionary that worked tirelessly, literally to his last breath, in organizing conscious Africans on the continent to connect politically with Africans abroad. Dr. William Sells provides great information on tangible Pan-African accomplishments from the African Liberation Support Committee. Members of the African Liberation Support Committee join with the former Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee cadre, Cortland Cox of Drum and Spear Press in Washington, D.C., and militants in the Caribbean and Europe to design and implement the first Pan-African Congress since the Manchester Gathering in 1945. Hosted by the Tanzania government in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania on June 28 through the 21st, 1974, it was by far the largest international gathering of Pan-Africanists ever to take place. The African American delegation dwarfed all others in attendance. There was also the Pan-African Skills Project, an aspect of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. International orientation which survived the organization was the establishment of the Pan-African Skills Project. This was an idea of James Foreman, which reflected Malcolm X's desire to provide African American technical assistance personnel to developing African nations, which actually came to life in 1969. This project sent over 250 Afro-American teachers, technicians and professionals to Tanzania and a small number to Zambia. It was probably one of the most concrete manifestations of Pan-Africanism to emerge subsequent to Malcolm's initiatives of 1964. Dr. Claude Anderson also provides us with concrete manifestations of Pan-Africanism. A significant conference for Black America occurred during the month of June 1993 when 5,000 participants and observers met in Gabon, Africa for the Second African American Summit. The summit's goal was to forge a common strategy between Black Americans and Africans that would promote economic development and progress in education and healthcare for Africa. According to the Washington Post, the first summit, which was held in the Ivory Coast in 1991, helped secure agreements that eliminated more than $1 billion of Africa's debt and resulted in multi-million-dollar Black U.S. business investments in Africa for African development projects. Decision-making through strategic planning is the wave of the future. The decision to organize and plan is the first step towards acquiring power and increased control over resources. By organizing self-sufficiency, self-empowerment, and racial accountability, Blacks have a conscious decision to both effect and be responsible for their own future. Blacks have paid dearly for entrusting their future to non-Blacks. If the lesson has been learned, then it is not too late for Blacks to begin leveling the competitive playing field to avoid being locked into a permanent underclass status among racial and ethnic groups in the hyper-competitive decade ahead. More to the point, there is a rule of human behavior that states if we continue to do the same thing than we will always have done, then we will continue to get the same results that we have always gotten. If Blacks want different results and an improved quality of life, then they must make different decisions as a group. African people have always been a compassionate and caring people. We should continue to do so. But it is now time for us to put our own interests first if we have any chance of changing our negative current condition.
Where you come from, as long as you're a Black man, you're an African. No mind your nationality, you have got the identity of an African. Cause if you come from Clarendon, and if you come from Portland, and if you come from Westmoreland, you're an African.